All right, welcome back. This is CSIS 1190. We're going to carry on to Chapter 9. It's entitled Multiple Sheets, Workbook Management. And what we're going to learn in this class is how to work with multiple sheets that are like templates of each other. We're going to use the book example, the Circle City Sporting Goods example. You guys can open up your ebook and follow along. And what we want to do is this particular data set is a sports retailer. It's like Sport Check here in the Lower Mainland of Vancouver, and they have multiple locations. They have 3 stores and they have a head office. So they have a store in Indianapolis, they have a head office in Indiana. They also have a store in Fort Wayne and in Bloomington, I think it is. So there are some data files that you will require for this example, and you can always get access to that on the Blackboard site under the course outline. If you scroll down through, let's see here, let it load here for a sec, and it's right here called My Student Lab Files. You just click on that. It opens up the student data files, and then you can go into Chapter 9 and download the files to work along. All right, so you get all of these files right here. So we're going to start off with this Indianapolis data set file. So you can click and open that one if you want, and it will open up the data to look something like this. All right, let's get back to the learning objectives here for a moment. We are also going to, in this class, talk about how to group and work with those multiple workbooks and worksheets. We'll look at how to do hyperlinks, how to manage windows, and how to view things more efficiently when you have multiple workbooks. We'll look at how to do a 3D formula reference compared to what we've already been doing, which is 2D. We'll look at how to link books together in a hyperlink type of environment. The 3D formula, yeah, we'll be doing that, a hands-on example. Look at how to audit formulas. We'll look at how to do some data validation and audit. Yeah, audit and data validation is the last learning objective of this chapter. All right, so to get started, let's open up the file, and it's called Indianapolis. Now, what we're looking at here again is a store, one store that's part of a franchise of multiple stores. And we're breaking down the data into quarters. Now remember, a quarter is just 3 months of the year. So it's January, February, March. Then we've got April, May, June, and so on. July, August, September. And we've got our 4th quarter is October, November, December. And then at the end, we have a yearly total for this one particular branch. So what we want to do is we've got the data that's been entered in the 12 months. But what we don't have, as you can notice, is that we don't have the titles or the totals or the format or the yearly totals here. So what I want to do is show you some ways that we can rapidly make things, to copy things and then to format them as well. So we could just grab this and copy it and then paste it. Then we could go back here, grab all this and copy and paste and paste and paste it and so on. But that's somewhat problematic. So what I want to do to get started with is show you this concept of grouping sheets together. So if we group, what we can do is simply say, I want to take quarter 1 to quarter 4. And in fact, I'm also going to include the yearly totals in here as well. Now I'm going to do that by holding the control key or the shift key down. You select the first one, and then you hold the shift key down and you select the last one. Control also works. In fact, if you use control, you can deselect them. So now they're deselected. And you can see what's selected with that little green underline. If I hold the control key down, I can individually select them. Or if I right click it, I can ungroup them. So different ways of grouping them. So what I want to do is I want to group all these together. I'm going to go hold the shift key down and press that. They're all selected. And you'll notice up here it says they've been grouped. So it's part of a group of sheets within the workbook have been grouped. What I want to do is I want to take that first line right here and I want to copy it across all of them. Now to do that, under the Home tab in the editing group here, I've got an option called Fill, and I can fill across all of the spreadsheets. And that'll take that one cell and duplicate it all the way across. Now another one I want is the departments and all of these. As you remember, quarter 2. Oh, and by the way, you can see now that I've got the sporting goods at the top here. You can see that. All right, so there's sporting goods on all of these tabs. We just did that. So we want to grab the department. You can see over here that they're not on quarter 2, 3, 4, or the total. So I'm going to grab that whole thing here and I want to copy it across. So the first thing I have to do is I group all of my sheets together, select it, go back into my editing tool over here and say, let's fill across the worksheets for all. Now, if I right click and I ungroup, I can go back in my quarter 2. You can see that's been copied over, that and that. And you can see already how things are starting to work. Now, I did miss a little bit on the top of the yearly quarters up here, but we'll address that later. All right, my next thing I want to do is I want to do my calculations. I want to put a total here, I want to put a total here, and I want to put all that other stuff. And I want that to occur on all 4 sheets. So again, I'm going to shift and group all those together, and then I'm going to type in total. And remember, this is happening on all 4 sheets, total here. And now I'm going to do a really neat little trick here, but I got to get the computer to do all the calculations. So if I sum up all the data and if I also select an area for the totals to appear, I can go back into my editing and say auto sum. And it automatically does that. Now that's already been accomplished for quarters 1, 2, 3, and 4 because they're all grouped together. Let's see there, they say group. The other thing I can do is I can format at the same time. So I can take all my data here and I can say, let's format it to dollars. Nice, no decimals. Now, the other thing I might want is take out those and say, I want those commas with no decimals and put in a line down here at the bottom. So it makes it look quite nice. Now, if you click on the sheets at the bottom, you right click and you go ungroup. Now, if you look at quarter 1, it's the way we did it. Quarter 2 looks the same, quarter 3, and quarter 4. The only real subtle difference is that the column widths are not quite perfect. And that's okay. I can simply just group them all together, and I can double click between each of the columns or select all of them and double click. And now they should all be the same. So I click on quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're all nice and tight, organized well. All right, now something I always suggest is that as we do these things, we should verify that our formulas are correct. So I'm going to randomly select quarter 1, and I see the answer down here. I know if I highlight all this data, it should equal this cell here. By looking at my status bar down here, it says that those two are the same. If I highlight all of those, it should be the same. It is, and I highlight those the same. It is. So because I did it on this and it was the same for all of these, they should all work. But again, you might want to do some spot checking to see if that equals this, and it does. I'm feeling pretty confident that the work is done correctly. All right, let's move on to the next feature, and that is the way of looking at all 4 of these at the same time. So what I want to do in this case is I'm going to go up into my view option, and I'm going to create a new window of this Indianapolis. So right now this is the only window. By clicking on a new window, it creates a completely new window, and you can't really see, but it put it right on top and said this is the window number 2. And I'm going to do that a couple more times because I want to show all 4 quarters at the same time. So I'm going to go back up into my where are we here, under my view, and click on new window, and I should get, that should be the 3rd window. Click on window view again one more time and click on new window, and now I've got all 4. So I've got 4 windows, but they're all just layered on top of each other. If you go down here, you can see there's window 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, well, that sounds good, but I want to see them all. To see them all, under view, I can arrange all the windows to be tiled, horizontal, vertical, or cascaded. So let's try cascaded, and it shows it in this sort of a, you can see here, it layers them. You can see they're cascaded on top of each other. I don't like that. I want to see all of them at the same time. So I'm going to say, let's go in, arrange the windows. This time, let's tile them, and it organizes everything I had open. So this was one that I had before. I'm going to shut that one down and retile it. This doesn't really look that good because I can't see my data. So what I can do is I can double click on the formula tab here, and that will auto hide the formula tab. And then what I can do, there we go, is I can change my sizing down. I can change that to, let's say, 70% for each of these windowed views. And what I've got is a nice way of looking at all of my quarters. So I can get a summary now of what I'm doing. So at the top here, I'm going to select this one. This will be my quarter 1. This will be quarter 2. Oops, that's going to be quarter 1. There we go. This will be quarter 3, and that's already quarter 4. All right, so there we go. And let's go put that back to 70%. I guess when I changed it re-established my zoom here for me. So just getting things organized. Oh, this one was already right. There we go. And again, we could also select all of these. And if I double click this one here, it fixes my, let's see here. If I click on all of those, let's see here if this will work. And that automatically fills it. Yeah. And let's go back up here. And you see what I'm doing is I'm selecting the columns, and then I double click on and I reset it. So now I'm looking at January, February, March in my top left corner, then April, May, June, July, August, September, and October, November, December. So what I've got now is I can see the entire, all 4 sheets at the same time, which is an extremely helpful way of doing this. All right, so let's have a look at the next level of this. And what we want to do now is we want to take all 4 quarters and we want to summarize it into a yearly report. So I don't need the rest of these. So now that we've gone through on how to show you how to visualize all the windows and all the sheets here, I'm going to select or close these ones down. So I'll close those down and I'll maximize this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my yearly. And what I want with my yearly is I want to summarize all 4 of these into my yearly totals. So I want my quarter 1 data here. So I want quarter 1 here. So I'm going to say quarter 1. A little trick here is because I typed in quarter 1 and I drag it across, it's relative. So I can just drag it across, type in the word total here, and I can type in the word total over here. And what I want is the total quarter data for athletic apparels. So that's this one right here. $360,000 I want in my total yearly total here. So what I'm going to do is simply go equal to, and I'm going to select quarter 1, and I'm going to say go ahead and select that right there. And sure enough, that's what it does. Now, I want you to pay close attention to how the computer wrote the reference. The reference is by showing you, first of all, going to the sheet first. Exclamation mark separates the sheet from the cell. And the cell is relative. It's E3. That means if I was to copy this down, it should work. And it does. In fact, I could even copy the total from their total and get the total answer there. Now you'll notice that the formats didn't work out for me, and that's fine. I can go back later and I can format this any way I want. I'll go back and I'll clean that up. All right, now if I was going to go to quarter 2, I could do the same thing. Could I drag this over? If I drag it over, quarter 1 is actually going to stay the same, and E will become probably F. Yeah, there it is. So it's relative. So I could go back in here. I could say modify that to a quarter 2 if I know what I'm doing, and I can type in an E, and sure enough, I get the right answer. Is athletic apparel's quarter 2 $160,000? Well, let's check it out. There's quarter 2, and there it is. Perfect. So it's working. So I can take that and double copy it down here, and it's working as planned. And I can repeat the same thing for the other 2 here, so I can do that really quickly. This will be 3. This will be E. This one over here will be quarter number 4, and that will be E. And both of those, now I can just simply double click or highlight and double click. You can see how quickly that you can do this stuff. And again, employers want people to be efficient at Excel. They don't want you to have to figure stuff out and spend hours learning how to do stuff. We can always learn something, but we don't want to learn it on someone else's time. All right, now this is another option. I could go over here and highlight all of this, go back up into my home, go into my auto sum, and it automatically sums up my data properly here. Is that correct? Is all of this data equal to this? And the answer is yes, it is. I'm feeling pretty confident. All of this is, and this must be. Okay, so we triple checked that. So what we've got now is a quarter. But what I want to do is I want to create a link now. So the next learning objective was, how do you create hyperlinks within inside a workbook? So the yearly total is the summary of quarter 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So I want to be able to link that by putting a hyperlink right here. So those right there, I want to put a hyperlink. Now to put a hyperlink in, we want to insert a hyperlink, and it's right here, link. So I go here and insert a link. If I already got, I could link to an existing file, but I'm going to click on this one. All right, now from there, I get this dialog box. What do I want to do? Link to an existing file or website? I could do that. I could say here, let's do it to, HTTP to Douglas College. I could link it right there, create a link to an external source, although that doesn't make sense to you guys. Let's right click it. Let's edit the hyperlink. We don't want that. That's not what we want. What we want it to do is we want it to link to another place within the document. I want it quarter 1 to link to quarter 1, but I also want it to go to a very specific range. I want it to go from E2 to E10. Now let's see what that does. That creates a hyperlink, and when I click on it, it moves me back to quarter 1, and it highlights it should be E3 to E10. Okay, I don't want the total. I just want this range highlighted. All right, so I want this, that'll be basically the same as this range right here. All right, so I'm going to right click on that, edit the hyperlink this time, and let's change that from E2 to E3. All right, does it work? Click on it. Nice, works perfect. Now let's do that again. Let's try a different approach. So this one here, I can right click it, and I can also create a link down here. It brings up the same dialog box. I want to place in the document. This would be for number 2, and this will be, again, E2 to E10. And I'm going to select OK. And does it work? It does. Oh, I should have done E3. I made a mistake again. Same mistake. All right, let's do the third one. Let's try to get it right this time. So again, I could either insert a link this way, or I can right click on it. It's so common that it's already embedded right there. They both bring up the same dialog box. All right, so this one right here, again, is E3. Get it right this time, to E10, but don't make sure you don't have any typos. It's to the third quarter, and let's test it. Does it work? It does. Perfect. Nice. You get the idea. You could do the same thing for quarter number 4 as well. Well, actually, one more thing I could show you here is if you're going to do E3 to E10, and you're going to go to quarter 4, you could also do a screen tip. Screen tip was enter or display quarter 4, let's say. And what does that do? When you roll your mouse over it, it tells you a little tooltip. It says display quarter 4. This one doesn't say that. It gives you some very cryptic message. So from a user point of view, if you're trying to make this more friendly to users, you can got the little screen tip says display quarter 4. Click on it. There's quarter 4, displays quarter 4. Now, something that I would like to do is that every time I go to my quarters, I want to return back to my yearly totals. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in a link here, a hyperlink, and I'm going to call it yearly totals. And what I want to do with that one is I want to reverse the process. I want to say yearly totals. I simply want to go back to yearly totals. Go back to A1 is fine. All right, it's a hyperlink. So now I can click on go back, and you can go back and forth and navigate without using the keyboard or typing any of these down here. It just gives you a little more flexibility. And if you want, you could take this one right here, you could copy it, and we could duplicate it and paste it right here because these are all the same. There we go. And we could have actually copied it as a group as well. So therefore, now in the future, every time I click on quarter 4, I can go back to my totals. I go back to quarter 3. I go back to my totals, go back to quarter 2, and so on. So I have a fully kind of navigatable workbook, which is really neat. And if you're in a let's say a department meeting and you're doing a presentation, you're showing some data, it's just nice to have things a little more automated to run a little smoother. All right, let's look at the next learning objective. All right, the next learning objective is to look at errors. Now, as you guys have progressed through Excel, you've probably seen errors come up, but probably kind of ignored them maybe. But it's a good idea to look at the error and try to determine what the error was. It makes you more aware of what's going on with Excel. So here's some common errors that you're going to find. This one is the number that you're looking for was divided by 0, and then what the heck, the exclamation mark. So of course we cannot divide by 0. You can see how I generated this error up here. I took 2 and I divided it by 0. Of course you cannot do that. It's undefined. It's illogical. So it's going to prompt you with an error. So sometimes when we're doing calculations and we're dividing to come up with a formula, you see this one quite often. Now another error is the name. You can generate a name error, like it's got a question mark. Excel doesn't know the name that you're trying to do, and the number cannot be displayed. So I generated this by typing in a payment formula, but I spelled it wrong. It doesn't exist. The function PMMT doesn't exist, so the computer says, what the heck, I don't know what that name is, and therefore I'm not going to display it. The other example I did was you can actually have the right name, but you have the incorrect arguments. I'm supposed to type in values in here, not labels. So as a result, the computer says, hey, I don't know what name you're talking about. I need values in here. Now, another one is the number. It says, hey, the number doesn't exist. What's going on here? Exclamation mark. So that means I did a payment function right here, but I didn't put in arguments. I didn't put the numbers in there. So it doesn't know what the number is. So it's coming up with a number error. Field is kind of an odd one. It wasn't even in the book, but I thought I'd show it to you. Field comes up, and here's the answer. The sum of B1 to B2. Well, what's wrong with that? If I want to sum up whatever's in here and here, let's put in a number, 1 and 1. All right, I still get field. What's wrong? Well, this is a syntax error. Syntax error is like a grammatical error where you are making a mistake. You forgot a period, a comma, a capital, a quote. In grammar, those are grammatical errors. When you're typing in a computer program, it's a syntactical error. And the error is, of course, it's not a period here. It should be a semicolon. You can see right away that the error is corrected and we're good to go. And that's how it works. All right, so that's an example of some error messages and how you guys should be, every time you find one of these, look at it. And there's also a dialog box that pops up and gives you more help. It says the field was not found. Well, it doesn't understand where the range is, the field. It doesn't understand the range because this is not in a range format. So it's giving you hints of what is wrong. If further help on this, you can get on the error. You click on this and so on. Show the calculation in steps. It's showing you right here. It's able to find the 1, but the B1, it doesn't have a clue what you're talking about. So this is what they call evaluate formulas, and I'll explain this one in a little later demonstration here. But you can access the debugger by showing the calculations. Or you can say, well, I don't care what the error is. I'm just going to ignore it and, you know, live life with an error, which is probably not a good idea. All right, so there's some examples of errors, and we will come across more of these as we progress. Let's have a look at the next learning objective. All right, so in this learning objective, let me just zoom in my screen. I'm looking for, again, data integrity, errors, and you'll sometimes come across these little green ticks. And when you find a green tick, you should investigate. It means that there's something that's an anomaly. Excel has some, AI features that will constantly comb through and look for common mistakes that people make. So when I look at all this, I can't really determine what the error is. This looks kind of correct to me, but if I click on it, you might see the problem right away. The other option you can see here, well, when I click on it, is there's a little exclamation box. Again, this exclamation box says what the Excel thinks the error is. It says copy the formula from above. So it's giving me a solution. It says copy the formula above down. Well, why is it telling me that? Well, it's because this one up here is summarizing quarters 1 to 4, but the one with the green tick on it is only quarters 2 to 4. Well, all of these ones are all from quarter one, but then this one for some reason got copied incorrectly. So we could solve this in a lot of ways. We could follow their advice and take the top one here and copy it down, and that solved the problem and fixed it. All right, something else I'm going to undo that for a moment. I'll show you something else. Another feature I'd like to show you guys is this key right here. It's the tilde key, tilde or tilde key, and I think it's like this, or accente grave. But anyway, like something like this, tilde. And the key, it can be found below the escape key, above the tab key. And what you use that key for is when you hold the control and the tilde key, it converts all of the data into the formula. So you can actually do an audit of the formulas. So you can see here, that green tab, is there an anomaly here? Well, it's hard to see. Like at first glance, you think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, that looks good. But then if you look more closely, it's B, 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 C, B, right? And these are all E's. So you can see there's an anomaly right there by looking at the tilde. Now I'm going to go control tilde, or accente grave is the, I think the other key. And I'm going to fix that. And again, the other way to fix this would be to grab the corner here and drag it and fix it. So there's a lot of ways you can fix it, or just rewrite it. All right, so those are some more examples of how to fix or audit your data set. All right, let's go look at the next learning objective. All right, in this learning objective, we're going to have a look at what they call a 3D formula. Now, a 3D formula is a regular formula with one extra dimension to it. Now, normally, you guys know that we could add up numbers. Let's say we got numbers like 1, 2, and then 3, 4. If we wanted to, we could sum up, say, equal to the sum of one dimension, that dimension, or we could do one dimension here, equal to the sum of this dimension, that's a row, and we could even do a sum of two dimensions. Two dimensions would be this dimension and this dimension. Well, there's one other dimension, or a third dimension, and that is by going rows or columns and rows and going through different workbooks. So we're actually going to leave go into a separate workbook on a different file to pull data out. Now, to do this properly, what I recommend is that you open up all of the files that you need to link to do the formula. So in this example, Indiana is the head office for the sporting goods stores that have in Indianapolis, in South Bend, and in Bloomington. So what I want to do is I want to bring in all the athletic apparel's summative data for the year into this worksheet right here. I want to sum it up, or I want to grab all the data. All right, so to do that, I'm going to put in a formula that's adding that extra dimension. So let me show you how that works. All right, so we're going to start with bringing in this athletic apparels for Indianapolis. Now to do that, I'm going to start off with equal to, let's sum up, bracket, and let's go to Indianapolis. So I'm going to go to my sheet that's open already, and I'm going to select my yearly totals, and I'm going to select the athletic apparels total for the year. So this is a total sum. Now you got to remember, this is a sum that's summing up from a completely separate workbook to a different worksheet to a different cell. And we could also have a range of cells to sum up all of that as well. In fact, I could have done this a little differently by going here. Let me just do another example. Equal to the sum of, bracket, let's open up our Indianapolis, and let's go to our yearly, and let's sum up all of this, which is basically the same as that. And we get the same answer. So a 3D formula is summing up that's not just in the worksheet or the workbook, but it's in something else's workbook. So we've got an outside workbook on a very specific sheet in a particular range that we're adding up. We're adding everything up from B3 to E3. All right, now if I copy that down, it wouldn't work, right? Because if you look at the first one here, it's taking absolute values. So those are absolute values. So what I would recommend is take those and make them relative. Now you can highlight them, push F4, and that'll put them back to the relative reference. Now that it's relative, we can copy it down. And sure enough, does it work? It works. How can we check? Well, let's go into footwear and see if the 335 there is in footwear. So let's go back to Indianapolis, footwear, and sure enough, there it is right there. Looks like it's working. So again, double check your work is always a good sign. So again, let's do that again. So it's equal to the sum of bracket, and we're going to go to Bloomington this time. So I'm going to open up my Bloomington sheet, and this is Bloomington right there. I want to go to yearly totals, and again, I could either highlight all this or I could select this. It's like a reference. I'm using a sum as a reference, but it still works. Or let's just do it as designed. I could do it like that. And sure enough, that works. And again, I'd have to highlight this, push F4 a few times before I can make it into a relative copy before it would actually work down the sheet. All right, let's have another look. We could just do a direct link. Now, a direct link means that I don't have to put in a formula. I can go equal to. Let's go back to the self band this time. So self band is right here. And self band is right there. Let's go to yearly. And I'm just going to do a link to this because that's the answer. So I don't have to do a sum. I can do just a link. And sure enough, that one works as well. So there's different ways of doing things, but it's understanding what you can, how it works. So you can make all those options and then double click to go down. All right. So now that I've got this stage here, I really want to calculate my department's totals. And these totals here, I could also recalculate. So again, I'm going to select all of this, and I'm going to do that trick we did before by going into auto sum and selecting everything. And sure enough, the answer is right here. 27,390, 690 and 68 cents. Ooh, that's hard. Now the format didn't work out quite right here, so I might want to go back in here and take out the format and fix this up. I don't want to spend much class time on that. You guys can go in and spend time fixing up the format. I really want to show you how that 3D formula worked. This is also a reference, almost like a 3D reference that would work. So you don't need the sum. You're just referencing an answer already. Or you could also do a 3D sum and sum up the same data again. So you've got different varieties. Now, some students have asked me in the past, well, what's the best way to do it? Well, it's debatable. I don't know if there's really a best way. The reference is definitely good if you've already checked the data in the past. If you've got a problem with the data with Bloomington or Indianapolis, those errors are going to be transposed over here. So either way, the data has to be checked before you do summative references or 3D formulas. All right, let's have a look at the next learning objective. All right, we're going to have a look at formula audits and data validation. And this is a really important learning objective. And the reason I say it like that is because if your formulas aren't correct, your data is not correct, then you're going to have pretty much garbage. In computers, we have a term called GIGO. GIGO is an acronym. G-I-G-O means garbage in equals garbage out. So whatever you guys type into your workbooks, if the data is not correct, if the input is not right, your answers are not going to be right. You can't process. How computers work is we input, the computer processes to develop output. So if the input is garbage, you can't get the output. So Excel has some very interesting tools. They're like programming tools that help you audit formulas to make sure things are correct. So what I want to do in this example is show you how you can audit a formula. Now to audit the formula, I'm going to go back into an old example that we did in a previous class. So let me open that up. All right, so I'm going to use this as an example because everybody has access to this file. We've done this before with a previous lecture. It's part of your course material. And what I want to do in this example is I want to audit a more complicated formula to better understand it. So in this example, what I want to do is, as you remember from this example, we were trying to look up a particular employee ID to find out what title they are. Now, to do that, we use a formula here called index, and then we use the word match, or a function called match, to figure out one of the arguments within the index function. So what we want to do is better understand how the audit works, or to better understand how a formula works, we can use this auditing tool. So what I want to start off with is understand that the employee ID of 4955 is sitting right here. As you can see, there are the second record in the list, and that the title is 1, 2, 3, 4 columns over. So let's go back into my formula and let's audit this. Now, how do you audit a formula? Well, under the Formulas tab, there is an area dedicated to doing formula auditing. So formula auditing, there we go. So what I want to do is this option right here called Evaluate the Formula. Because I've highlighted it, I want to evaluate it. Now, what it's going to do is going to pop up with a dialog box, and it's going to go through kind of a step-by-step manner. So what you have to do is you have to look really carefully at the function that you're working with, and what point are you looking at. Now, if you remember your rules from math, BEDMAS, or rules of order of operation, you have to do what's in the brackets before you do the exponents, the decimals, and so on. And if you look at this little underline indicates at what part is it evaluating the formula. So right now we're looking at B1. So where's B1? B1 is 4955. So what that B1 should be is it should evaluate it to 4955. I click on step, and sure enough, the B1 evaluated to 4955. That's great. So I know that that part is what I want. Let's step out. So then what it does is it puts in the 4955 as the argument within the match as what we're looking up in the range of A7 to A26. So A7 would be the first employee all the way down to A26, which would be the last employee. Okay, that's fine. And then the 0 is to make sure that the match is exact. It has to be. It's not a close. It's not a range. It has to be exact. So what I'm equating this down to, what I'm expecting this is to match, is to come up with the integer value of the record of 4955, which is right here. So that's index 1, 2. So the answer to all of this should just be 2. So we equate that, and sure enough, it equated it to 2. So it pulled out the match and it equated it down to 2. That's good. That's what I wanted. So now we have to look at the index function. Index is saying, well, let's look up in the entire data set. So all the way from A7 all the way over here to I26 over down to here. Look at the entire data. And we're looking for the second record, the second index in the list. So it's 1, 2. So it's right there. And it's looking for the fourth column. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the answer should be account rep. So equate that. It is account rep. So what we've done here is we've walked through how to evaluate a more complicated formula. So I hope that makes sense. And it's a great tool for trying to debug complicated formulas. So when you guys are doing those if functions with the multiple logical operators like and or not, they can be kind of complicated and confusing. You can use this the formula auditor to look at that in more detail. Great tool to look at. All right, now that's a little on the auditing tool. And the other option I want to show you is this one here called Trace the Precedents. Now, precedents are pre-existing things that have happened or that are part of to make it up. So what did it take to make up this function? So we go into formulas, we go into trace the precedents, and it says, it draws arrows. It says take B1 is part of this, and also this dark thick line, this range of all of this. You can see this blue highlighted range makes up this formula. All right, so we go back to formulas, track the precedents. So again, and it gets even more complicated. It says, well, then from this range here, this range is also connecting all this. It gets so complicated at this point, it starts to get mesmerizing. So that's not really going to help us too much. So I'm going to simply remove the arrows. Now we can work it in a kind of a backwards way. We could say here, let's take the data instead of finding out what the precedent is, let's look at trace it. What does it depend upon? So if I wanted to know what this, where this cell is dependent upon, it's used here. So what we use this formula tracing is to locate functions and formulas to help audit our formulas. All right, here's another one we could probably go through. Is you might remember this is a raise status. Do they get a raise or not? So this person was due for a raise, this person was not due for a raise, and so on. So let's go through and have another look at how we can audit this formula. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to audit. All right, so here it is here. If there's two conditions that have to be true for this to exist. The first condition has to be, does D7, so D7 is right here, the manager equal manager. Now that's problematic right there because I can see here there's a capital M here and there's a small m here. So that formula right there, I'm suspecting it might not work. So to be on the safe side, I would probably go back in here and say, hey, let's fix that to a capital M. So right away, I already found a problem with my formula. Let's go back in and audit it again. So is D7 equal to manager? That's true. So the first condition is true. Now the second condition has to be true. Is G7, so we go over to G7, so let's move that there. Is 68,750, is it less than F3? Well, F3 is right here. Is it less than 70,000? And that's true too. 68,000 is less than this. So both of these are true. Therefore, it's going to put in you're due for a raise. What's true? Otherwise, it would say you're not available or there's no raise. So let's go into step. Step says it was a manager. Nice. Step out. So manager equals manager. True. Nice. Let's evaluate the next one. Is so that's true. Is G7 less than F3? Let's step in. Well, is G7, which is 68,750, less than this right here? Well, that should be true. And we're going to step in. It's 70,000. Step out. So we can ask ourselves our question really clearly. That should be true. Both of those are true. If that's true and use the logical comparison operator of and, then this whole thing is true. We should do what's in this argument, not this. This is the true argument. That's the false argument. So therefore, we want true to be due for a raise. Perfect. So we've used the formula evaluation to actually learn how this actually step by step works through the function. Great tool to understand and a great tool to use. And I've used this many times throughout my career with Excel. All right, another thing, like I said before, if you go Control tilde, it brings up all the functions from the data view. The other way to do that, since I'm here, is under formulas, they also have show formulas. So this is another way to do it. If you roll the mouse over it, it'll tell you it's show the formula using the Control and the accent aigu or the tilde key there, right there. You see that right there? And that's how you can do it, the quick keyboard method. That's what I use all the time. All right, so that's it for that learning objective. Let's have a look at the next learning objective. All right, the next learning objective is data validation. Data validation means anytime that you're entering data, you've got a whole range of things you can enter in. For example, the student or the employee ID is a very specific type of number. It's 4 digits. It starts at, it has to be over 1,000. It has to be less than 999, and it can't be a letter. For example, if I type in Ryan here, well, if I type in Ryan, it's going to generate a number is not available error. How could it generate an index number when I'm trying to look up Ryan inside of these numbers right here? That doesn't make sense. It's illogical. It gives me an error. So how do I track this down? How do I get that error message to fix that? Can I, calculate with my debugger? Well, let's go back to the debugger, and I can say here I'm entering in Ryan, in trying to find Ryan through A7 to A26. And the computer's like, well, that doesn't, Ryan is not available. The number is not available in here. So the problem with this is that I've been able to type data that's going to generate errors, and I want to avoid that at all costs. So what I can do is I can get the computer to force it into a number. Now I can do that under the data tab. There's an option here called, it's data or formula. Now, do I forget where it is? It should be data. And I think it's, oh, sorry, it's they changed the icon here on me. It's data validation. And it's under the data tools, makes sense, data validation, and you get this dialog box. So what we're going to do is we're going to assign rules. Now, these are the same type of rules that you guys see when you see error messages. How many times have you guys seen an error message? I'm sure in your life many, many times. What we're doing is we're actually going to create an error message by determining what someone is doing to possibly flag the error message. So I know that the number that I'm going to enter in here is going to be a whole number. I don't want it to be a decimal. I don't want it to be a date, time. I don't want to have a fixed length. I could do fixed length at 4, but then I could type ABCD, and that's 4. So what I'm going to do is pick a whole number, and I want the numbers between 1,000 and 9999. That's my rule, and that means that that will help reduce certain types of data entry errors. Now, I can also put an input message in here. I can say the input message is a trigger to help people understand what they're doing. So you can say like, enter the employee, spell it right, ID. All right. And we can have an input error like, please enter the employee ID correctly. I mean, that's redundant, but you get the idea. And now if they don't do it correctly, we could have a message that says, hey, do you want to stop them from entering the data if they do it, if they break the rule? Or do you want to just warn them but still let them do it? Or do you just want to FYI, hey, this is just, you just messed up big time. This is pretty serious. If they don't follow my rules, I want to stop them in their tracks. This is a data entry error. All right. You must enter a valid, does that make sense? A valid employee ID. How's that? Now I've got my input message to the users so they can help type the right thing in. And you can also type in an error message. The message could also be things like example, and even tell them what the rules are, something like that. All right. So what does that mean? That means that in the future, if someone's going to enter data right into that box, because maybe they're the data entry people, they're not an Excel spreadsheet people, they don't understand as much about Excel, and they don't know what to type in. This is very clear. Enter the employee ID. Now it's pretty obvious right here, but some people need extra help. Please enter the employee ID correctly. Example. So they think, oh, that's my employee ID. Can I just type in Ryan? No, I can't. That's a data entry error. You must enter a valid ID. Oh, okay. Let me retry. Let me type in Bob. Or let me type in 100. No, that's not a valid ID. Do you want to try again? Oh, yeah, sure. I'll type. Yeah, it just will not let you enter data unless it's correct. Now, I can still type in an ID that does not exist. No employee has that number, but it still works. So how can I solve that problem? Well, that problem can be solved again by going into data and changing the data validation rule from a whole number to a list. Now, this only works if the list is unique data. So I'm going to simply say I want to create a list of all of these employees, and I want to attach it right to that cell right there. All right. Now, when I click on the cell, I get a dynamic control of a pick list right here. When I click on it, I can select my employees right here. And I click on it, I can't even add another number here. It won't even let me. So it really helps reduce the GIGO problem. There's very little garbage going in because this is the only data that they can get. Now, we could do that with all sorts of fields. With this one right here, we could do a rule that is set up for data validation, and we could say we want this for a date. Not only do we want it for a date, but we could say that we could have a date that is, let's say, January 1st, 2000, because that's when the company started, and we're going to go till January the 1st of 20, and we're very optimistic. Okay, now if we come up and we say, oh, we want to enter in a date that was hired before January the 1st, let's say 1999, the computer says, hey, you can't do that because the date doesn't exist. So my point here is that we can help reduce data entry errors by using data validation in our systems. Now, the managing the salary threshold could be the same thing. This one right here, I'll let you guys kind of go through. It's under, let's see here, we want data validation, and we could actually do something a little different. Let me just try one more thing here. So I could say I want it to be a whole number, because it could, or decimals, because it could be dollars and cents. And let's say the minimum threshold is 30,000 and the maximum threshold is $1 million. But the input message, I'm not going to put in, but my error message, I'm going to say it's just a warning. Now, what that means is if I put in 50,000, of course, that's going to work. But if I put in 20,000, that's beyond my validation rule. So the computer comes up and says the valid entered is not defined in the cell. But it's asking me that I could still continue. Do I still want to continue with 20,000? That's a nice feature. It doesn't mean they're forcing me to comply. Normally I'd say no and fix my error, but I could say yes. If I say yes, well, that's going to allow to break the rule. And in that case, if you ever want to find out where you broke the rules, you can always go back into data validation and circle the data errors that were broken. So you can find rules that have been broken. There you go. And that's that's an example of how data validation works and a couple of the variations. Super handy. Highly recommend you guys really get into this and learn it, because all good worksheets have lots of data validation rules in it. All right, let's have a look at the next learning objective. All right, so the last learning objective I want to talk about in this lecture is a function I use all the time. And it has to do with error messages that do occur just because the data doesn't support the formula completely. So an example of that might be this one right here I just wrote. So I'm going to put in a condition that says, if the salary is equal to the due for a raise. So if they're due for a raise, I want to calculate their salary and multiply it by, let's say, 9%. And in this case, that's true, correct? So that's true, and we're all good to go. But if I copy this down, you'll notice that this one here was not true. So we went through here, we said, okay, is 49,000, is it equal to, or I should say, is are they due for a raise? Is the NA equal to due for raise? Sorry. So are those two equal? That's false. If that's false, don't do this. But there's nothing that I've said to in its place. So the computer says, hey, the answer is false. This one's true. This is true because this is came up with a true answer. This one came up with a false answer. So the only thing the computer can output is false because there was a false response. Now, I could solve this by just putting in a comma and saying, well, if it was false, I could say, well, no raise or something like that. That would solve the problem, right? So I could go here now and just copy this down. So that would solve the problem. Now, I don't want to do that in this case. I want to show you another method of doing that. So let's go back to the original formula. And instead of saying if, just a regular if, I could use another function called if error. And if an error occurs, if I get an error like false or an error occur, I can just do something different. I could turn it into a true or something like that. So I'm going to go if the error occurs, let's see here. If error occurs, sorry, I made a mistake here. So we had the regular if function right here, but then we can encapsulate this with another one called if an error occurs within the if. And if that's the case, we can put in quote, quote, which is just basically put in nothing in there. Now this was true, so it puts in the calculation. But now if I copy this down, it should put in a quote. And I think the reason was, let's see, did I put it in the wrong spot? I probably put it in the wrong spot. There we go. So my point there is if an error occurs, we can always use, hide the errors, and we just want the data. So this if error function is, it's a great function. I use it all the time because I'm always using the if functions and I get a lot of errors occurring. Now we solved that with this original problem by actually typing in an error message like not available. Now I could have done this exact same thing here and solved it in this case by just taking out NA and putting in a blank. And sure enough, that would give you the same result. Let's just copy that down and we get the same result right there. All right, well, anyway, that's pretty much the end of chapter number 9 here, and I hope that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, again, you can always email me or stop in from my office hour and chat with me online. Other than that, I will see you guys online for the next chapter.